Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of thecinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. Today, we are back with the 7th entry in our 3 films that got you through the 2020 pandemic interview series. In this series, I'm speaking with a wide variety of friends, colleagues, and professionals working in the film industry, largely in my backyard of Oklahoma. I'll be speaking with each guest about how the pandemic impacted their line of work before talking about the 3 films that helped them get through it all. Today, I'll be speaking with the host and producer of the Tunes podcast, Harold Storey. I'll talk with Harold about how the pandemic impacted his ability to produce his podcast and also how it changed how he spoke with his guests and coordinated those bookings. And as always, we'll shift the conversation to the 3 films that helped him get through it all to close the show. Before we jump in today, I did want to quickly remind you that if you enjoyed today's interview, please consider leaving us a rating and a review and a follow or a subscribe on your preferred podcast app. It's the most impactful way you can support the show at this time. Another way that you can participate in this special interview series is by emailing your 3 films to thecinematropolis@gmail.com, or you can follow us on social media and share your picks with us there. That is on Twitter @thecinematrop or on Facebook at facebook.com/thecinematropolis. Send us your picks for a chance to have them read on the show. Now, let's get to more about today's guest. According to the Apple Podcast description, Harold Storey heads up the Tunes podcast, a show dedicated to all things concerning animation and music. Now, Storey has recorded nearly 150 episodes and featured a wide variety of people of interest in the Oklahoma City area. Those are folks who are doing a lot of really cool things, mostly related to pop culture and art here in Oklahoma City, as well as very special guests like Jim Lang of Hey Arnold fame, Jarrett Reddick from Bowling for Soup, Mike Kennedy of the All-American Rejects, Butch Hartman of the Fairly Odd Parents fame, and Chris Jai Alex, among many others. Tunes is a part of Mostly Harmless Media, a local new media organization here in Oklahoma City that produces a wide variety of new media content. And Harold's frequently partnering with Tower Theater on several Projector Club screenings, including screenings of films like Perfect Blue, Interstellar 555, and The Tokyo Godfathers. And I have to say, Storey is also a longtime collaborator with the Cinematropolis and us here on the Cinematic Schematic. And the conversation really, it's going to play a lot more like a pair of old friends reuniting after a very challenging year apart. # long live the bromance. But yes, I have been on Harold's show, Tunes, many, many times. So it was a real pleasure to welcome him to the Cinematic Schematic, where we could talk in depth about the films that helped him get through last year. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hear it from Harold. We have another wonderful guest for you back on the Cinematic Schematic today. I'm so thrilled to be joined by Harold Storey. He's the host and producer of the Tunes podcast. He is, in my opinion, one of the staples of Oklahoma's pop culture, podcast or content scene. He talks about both current music, classic music, indie, rock music, in addition to pretty much any form of animation. He's had me on his show several times to talk about anime. Harold Storey, welcome to the Cinematic Schematic.
Yo, what's going on?
Hey, man, good to see you. It's been a hot minute since I've seen you. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Yeah, I think we've talked about this maybe another time when I had you on my show, but I think the last time we hung out was at Cajun Corner before we recorded one of the last episodes I had you on my show.
No, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I think your podcast, Tunes, was the last in-person podcast I recorded before stuff started shutting down.
Wow, okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, I've done like one in-person show since then, and in the middle of the summer. And so, yeah, you Tunes holds a very special place in my heart. You and I always... You give me an outlet to talk about all my anime opinions that I don't really get to on the Cinematic Schematic as much, especially like 90s, early aughts anime that I'm really fond of. So
I'm like, bring your takes, my guy. I want all the takes for sure.
Well, we're here today to talk about you, though. And man, you do all sorts of really cool stuff around the city, both, on the podcast scene here in Oklahoma. You also do a lot of things involved in the Oklahoma City marketing scene. And you and I actually collaborated on some really cool events at the Tower Theater a couple of years back. And one thing that always really struck me about you is how everything you're doing is very community oriented, and you're just trying to bring people together to celebrate things they love, in most cases, either anime or music. So if you could just tell me a little bit more about, what your day-to-day or week-to-week process looked like pre-pandemic.
Yeah, man. As far as like putting together stuff for the show, it's just kind of a cacophony of like things that I'll like think of in the middle of the night. And like I have people that I'll like. Mike Allen is one of them. He's the first guest I ever had on my show. And I'll text him at like 2 a.m. and be like, "Is this a cool idea?" And he'll be like, "Oh, obviously he'll text me back at like a normal person's time, like at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. He's like, "Yeah, it's cool." But he's just come to, like I have all those things, like all these ideas, and there's just like no time on like specifically whenever I think stuff up. But I'll just, brainstorm on an idea. Maybe I'll watch something or, listen to something and it'll trigger like, oh, what if we did this take on this thing? What if we started, we all like, a lot of us like the emo music. What if we did like a big bracket of all the bands and one whole month was dedicated to that? That was like one of the last like big things I did, was the March Sadness project I did for my show. And, I just really like doing stuff like that. I've gotten into doing like a lot of these battle brackets, where I'll just put together like, I like all these 90s cartoons that are based on comic books. Which one's the best one? Let me get people on that love comics and we'll talk about those. And then we'll get to like, hey, I like that show, Hey Arnold. Why don't I reach out to the guy that did the music for Hey Arnold? And, he randomly was like cool to talk to me. So I got to talk to Jim Lang that did all the music for Hey Arnold. And, he's a really cool guy and like has agreed to come back on, like we're going to collaborate with him later. But it's just like a lot of cool stuff. Like it's just cool to have an outlet where you can just try things. Like not every single thing that I do is just like dynamite, but I'm like, I want to try this and this could be fun. And I want to get my friends together and talk about, why do we like these things? What sticks out to us about this? Like, why do these things resonate with us? And so that's always kind of been the approach, just having that idea and running with it and finding people that like, are in line with that and that are down to record with me. So that's just kind of always been what I did. And, I'll just keep doing that because it kind of works.
It's lots of fun, and I really like how you incorporate a lot of interactive stuff, in particular on Instagram. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like I'm pretty good at social media, particularly Twitter, but then I'll get on Instagram and realize that Harold Storey can literally run like light years around me because he's always doing all sorts of cool polls and interactive like GIFs and photos and stuff, and I feel like I am dated AF whenever I'm looking at Harold's like stories and stuff. So Harold's stories, Instagram stories.
Oh,
yes.
I like it. Well done, sir. It was just like a funny thing one day. I don't remember what the first one was, but it was like, I started doing these things in stories like Caleb was saying. It was just like, hey, reply to this and I'll tell you who would play you as in a movie about your life. Like what actor would play you in a movie about your life. And boy, I am not lying when it was like 200 something people replied to that, and I was like, geez. And so it literally took that one thing took me days to finish because I'd be like, well, who does this person look like? Like, what could the blurb be? It was just like, it turned into a job, but I just like doing stuff like that. And I'd be like, reply to this and I'll tell you what dessert you are. Like, I don't know why I had just started doing that. I just thought it was funny. And then it resonated with people and they're like, yeah, I'll just reply to this and see what random thing Harold gives me. I don't know why, but it's just, I don't know, dude. Boredom out of the pandemic.
yeah, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. In pandemic, people are like, they aren't going out. They're looking at their Instagram channels and they're looking for a fun thing. And you're like, hey, I can give you this fun fact about yourself you didn't know if you just participate. You're doing a lot of really great stuff on social media, and of course your podcast Tunes, which can be found on Spotify, any of the different podcast apps out there. On the podcast side, though, I know that there were a lot of content creators and in particular podcasters that noticed a pretty big hit earlier in the spring when the pandemic really started impacting daily routines. People aren't driving their cars to work. They're not I would say early on, there's probably some people who aren't even exercising because they're like, can I go outside? When there's a lot more unknown variables. So I'm just curious, did you see any sort of impact on your downloads or listenership on Tunes?
Yeah, man, I think it was just, you said it perfect, like across the board. It was just like, I never realized how many of my favorite shows I would listen to on my way to work, like in my car. And so we were, out of the office for so long, it was just like, man, I'm like, when we were finally like back into the office to some like very distanced, like we have a small enough team that we're kind of lucky that we could do that. And when we got back, I was like, man, like I have like episodes and episodes of this show that I have not watched or like listened to. So, I think it affected a lot of people. So I definitely, like, I saw the numbers go way down, like, just because it was like between people not being out and, in their normal routines of when they actually listen to the show and everything. And then also, I recorded, I don't have a great setup at home, so I record in my studio up here at Tower. And it was just, I wasn't able to get up here. So it was like, oh, like, do I want to sacrifice the quality, and it kind of, I'm looking to invest now in like a home studio. So like, I don't have to really like make that call, anymore. Like it really has driven me to be like, okay, what do I need to like invest in to get the quality up at home? Because that was like a big part of it too. It was like, I don't want like a big quality difference in the show too. But I did, have opportunity to do something kind of cool that I had an idea for, that I started doing interviews with people like over Zoom. Like I started doing Zoom, like we're doing now, but I would record the call and then it saves the video and audio, and it's not horrible, depending on people's connection, if they have a mic and stuff. And, so I started doing it like that, but I had video for the first time ever doing the show. So I started doing like a live stream and like, I downloaded a thing, OBS. It was like a live streaming thing that you can connect to your Facebook page. And so I would do like a, 10, 15-minute interview with someone and then cut in like, I have friends that were like making music throughout the whole pandemic. So like they were doing covers and stuff like that. So like I would have them send me the video and I would like cut their video in after one of the in between like interviews. And then like a local cafe that I like, they have a commercial. I was like, can you send me that commercial? And I would like, in between, it was like a programming block. Like I would have like an interview and then a commercial interview, then a music, like one of my friends doing music. So it kind of created an opportunity to like, for me to create in a way that I'd never done before. So it was like fun to kind of explore that. But I did, to some point it was just like, it's just like almost like exhaustion, I guess, was like, I've been looking for a reason maybe to take a break for a little bit anyway. So it was like, I did a few of those and then took a break. And then now it's like, I get in and record whenever I have an idea, instead of, really holding to myself, like, I want to make sure that I get in every week, like above everything. It's like, if I get in to record something that means something to me, then I like that. And then that's just kind of what I'm going off of now. Like, I don't want to, it got to the point where if it ever feels like it's a job, like I don't want to, it's like, ugh, like I didn't do this so that I could like make $1 million or, get 10 million people to listen. I have like ideas. I feel like I'm a pretty creative guy and I like to bring people together and hear about their story and like why they like things. So as long as I can keep doing that, that's like the whole heart of like what my show is. So I just kind of do it, that's kind of been the process now. But before it was like, really, I would really harp on myself to like, I got to make sure I get in the studio. And if I'm going to be in the studio, I might as well do like 3 or 4 episodes all at once, which was good. I mean, it would be good for my show because I could like not have to go in all the time. But I don't know. In a way, it was like, that was one of the silver linings was like, getting a little bit of time back that I would like otherwise not have been at home or things like that. That's just kind of how it's been for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I can echo similar sentiments, without going too far down this path. But I think, one thing that the pandemic really forced a lot of, I think everyone to do to a certain extent, but especially content creators in particular with this area, is to start questioning things. You're like, is it mandatory for me to get an episode out every week? Am I just doing it to do it? Am I doing it to get quality content, quality interviews out there? And if I'm not, if I'm holding myself to such a such a standard where I get episodes out every week, but the quality's taking a dip, whether it's the audio quality like you're talking about just due to circumstances in the pandemic, or even content quality. You're like, maybe I should just take a break, or maybe I should change my cadence a little bit. Cinematic Schematic, I was off for, I think, like 4-ish months just because a lot of stuff's going on, and if at any point, like you said, if it becomes a job, burnout is real. And I know it's been a really wild year for a lot of people in a lot of different roles. It seems like to me for a lot of folks, they were feeling burnout in their jobs, and other folks didn't have jobs at all. So, just kind of a weird kind of position we found ourselves in. But I do want to shift gears here and start looking at the future. 2020 was insane, unprecedented, all the cliches, unprecedented, new normal, yada, yada, yada. I want to know, though, for you, how is 2021 looking comparative to last year? Do you think things are looking up? Are they about the same? Or are you feeling like it's going to be an entirely different landscape for you in Tunes?
Yeah, I think as far as like the approach in the show, I think it's just, like you said, it was probably, I was about 3 or 4 months probably going without an episode. And that's kind of just inspired me to be like, you know what, I would rather take my time and really flesh out an idea, or, finally get someone that I really have been wanting to get down and talk to and like really know what I'm going to do with that episode, than to just make sure that I check a box to get an episode out every week. You know what I mean? So I think in a way it kind of like gave me a little bit of pause to be like, okay, what do I really want this to be? Because I don't want to just do it just to do it. Like, I want to do it because it's something I care about. Not to say that I didn't, care about all the people that I've had on, but it was just like, it became such a chore, the actual production of it. I loved when I was in it, like the doing part of it, like the getting to hang out with people and learning about them. Like, I love that part, but it was just like I would record with people out in California, and, it'd be 7 o'clock for them, but 9 o'clock for me. And then, I'd get done recording at like 11 and then still have to edit the whole thing. It's like, dang, like my wife's at home by herself. Like, I want to get home and like hang out with her and the dogs, like.
And you got a day job too, right?
Yeah. And you got a day job. It's like, geez, like I can't be out like all hours. So the big thing for me, going into this year is like, I've really gotten a lot of perspective. I feel like from that I'm like, you know what? I'm really going to like be thoughtful and think about what it is that I'm putting out, instead of just making sure that I check that box, just put out an episode every week.
Yeah, I think that's a good challenge, Harold, and I really appreciate you saying that. Again, you keep putting out great shows, and I do think, sometimes that break and that refresh, that R&R is going to go a long way, and like you said, helping you develop even better ideas. We've talked about all of how was 2020, but let's get to the fun stuff. Now, Harold, I've asked you to select 3 movies that helped you get through an especially challenging year, and I'm actually pretty pumped to hear what all you picked as far as films go. So I'm not,
For sure.
You can choose to rank these or not. I didn't ask you to rank them. So in no particular order, let's jump into the picks you brought to the table. Though, if you do want to rank them, no harm, no foul. So let's start with this first film. What was the first movie that you selected and why?
Man, I really thought about what it was, not only that I saw that was new this year, but things maybe that I got into that I had been meaning to watch, because that 2020 also gave a lot of time for people, you finally had time because you're at home, I finally got to watch some things I've been holding off on, or like just hadn't made the time to watch. But I feel like I really wanted to start with like a big one. And so for me, my first one that I picked was Tenet.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones too. Use it carefully.
To do what I do, I need some idea of the threat we face.
As I understand it, we're trying to prevent World War III.
I'm not saying Armageddon here.
No. Something worse.
The film that saved cinema.
Yeah.
Yes.
The tentpole film. quite possibly the last film I've seen in the theater. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen this year, but so yeah, just to be candid with you on that, like I just mentioned, that was one that I was really wrestling with, and I listened to your Tenet episode, and it seemed like you guys kind of echoed those sentiments that I was like, man, like I've been waiting for this movie. I love Christopher Nolan's films. Like, what am I going to do? And so it was the opening night, and I talked to Madison. I was like, man, like I would really like to go watch this. Like, we'll wear a mask the whole time. We're not going to touch anything, talk to anybody. Like, and man, to my surprise, it was kind of the big thing that got me was we get to the theater and opening night it was Quail Springs AMC, and there was one guy by himself and then us.
Wow.
And it was just like, you would have never imagined that in a million years before this happened, that would happen for a huge movie like this. That was a big thing, man. Like I will probably be 70 years old thinking about the time that I went and watched Tenet in the theater in 2020, and like, wow, wasn't that crazy that this is quite possibly could have been one of the last movies I saw in that format, like at that time, until who knows when, you know, like that's the big thing is like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, so that was what I wrestled with. And, you know, that movie, it was a lot of hype around it too. And that's like the tough thing too, is to like separate some of the hype from the hype from the actual art of the movie. And so, but yeah, man, that was, I had to start out with that one for sure, because that was like the biggest, like most impactful one for me.
That is like the pandemic film for a lot of people. Like, I'm not going to lie. And even if I hated the movie, which I didn't, we did, of course, our review that you referenced, and I came out pretty middle of the road on it, and I want to get your take here in a second. But I do think, like, what's funny is even if the movie had been amazing, like life-changing amazing, or terrible, like, I don't think any of us would forget if you went and saw it in the theater, it was like a big thing, you know? You're like, I don't know what the future of movies is going to be like. I haven't been in so many months, and this just feels like a thing, you know, you want to do. If I think of the pandemic and I'm a moviegoer, I'm probably going to think about Tenet and all the hype and then all the follow-up conversation about it. But I am curious, what did you actually think of the movie overall?
It's one of those things that as soon as it was over, I was like, I've got to see it again. Like, I can't. And you guys like had like good points in your episode. Everybody should check that out if they haven't listened to it. It was a good episode, especially if you're like on the fence about that film. They had some good points, but it was one of those things that was like, if you know Christopher Nolan, this was like that he made this movie. And so to me, it was like hard going into a movie like that too. At the end of it, sometimes it's like people have their mind made up already. It's like they have their tent pole in their head of like, this is my Christopher Nolan movie, and every next one that I have to see, it has to at least be this good or it sucks. And so I've never really subscribed to that. I brag about myself being someone that lets themselves enjoy things. And so if I had to give it an honest grade, I'd probably give it maybe a high C to low B, though, in the spectrum of Christopher Nolan's other body of work, to be honest with you. But I think it had the elements that it did tackle. It freaking went for him, man. Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
And if you haven't seen the film, skip ahead, like hit the little skip button a few times.
30 seconds, 1 minute, yeah.
It's a spoiler-ish. Something that I thought of, I haven't seen it again, but I was thinking about when they were in, inverting time, when they were going back through, and they're going through like the whole, the airport, like with the storage thing. I was thinking that I wondered if you could see at the beginning of the film, if you saw an ambulance driving in reverse amongst all the chaos, because when they get to that, the ambulance goes. So when it was going forward in the real time at the beginning, it would have been going backwards. So I was like, oh my God, I've got to watch it again. Like that was one, I don't know why that thing stuck out to me, but that was like the end of that inversion part when they get through like the fighting themselves and everything. They get to the ambulance and they're taking the ambulance. I was like, oh my God, I wonder if there's an ambulance in the beginning and we didn't see it. Like, so it was like, I think when movies do things like that, that is the thing that I love about stories like that you're like, oh my God, this one thing, let me like really explore that and see if that happened, or what if this happened, like all the theorizing too of like what did this mean, what's the significance of this. Like I love that kind of stuff. And so for a Chris Nolan film, like I think it was very on par with things like that. But what do you think? Did you see an ambulance? We got to watch it back.
Dude, now I got to go watch it a third time. And me and my girlfriend have already talked about watching it a third time. I did, because I have been long enough between when I saw it over the summer and then when I saw it when it came out on home video that I didn't think to look for it. But man, that's a great question. Like, what I didn't even think, yes, that ambulance would have been going in reverse if it appeared the first time, if we saw it. So now, I really super want to double check. And even if it was going in reverse, would we even notice? You know, the first time you see it, would you even notice? Right?
I was shook. I was like, bro, that's crazy. We didn't even notice it earlier.
Yeah, man, I'll just say, like, we talked about, again, check out the Tenet review of on the Cinematic Schematic if you haven't listened to it. But I'll just leave it here saying that, yes, Harold, I agree. I think the most beautiful and awesome thing about it is it is a Christopher Nolan film through and through, in the sense that I haven't stopped thinking about it since I saw it, and I haven't stopped wanting to talk about it since I saw it. You know, just because, like you said, throwing theories out there and really digesting the movie. Even imperfect as it may be, I think it still has that going for it for sure.
Yeah, man. That was that. I had to lead off with that one because that was just, you put it perfectly earlier. It was like the movie of the pandemic.
Let's go ahead and move on to your second film that got you through the 2020 pandemic. What's your next selection, Harold?
Okay, I didn't want to cheat, and I didn't know. I figured I could take a little bit of liberty. I'm not going to try to tell you how to live your life and do your show, but I'd never before this year. It was one of those things that when I finally had time to like do things and watch things that I wanted to watch. So I'd actually never watched any of the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movies, and so I watched all of them.
The world is changed, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. But the Ring of Power has a will of its own.
Evil is stirring in Mordor. The ring has awoken. Sauron needs only this ring to cover all the lands of darkness.
What must I do?
The ring must be destroyed.
Cast back into the fires of Mount Doom.
I know what hunts you. They're coming.
They will find the ring and kill the one who carries it.
You have my sword.
My bow.
And my axe.
You carry the fate of us all, little one.
This task was appointed to you, and if you do not find a way, no one will.
You went almost 19 years of your life not having seen a Lord of the Rings movie. This is beautiful. I used to, you know, when you were in college, you probably got hazed over this or whatever, but I just want to say this is beautiful because you got to experience Lord of the Rings for the first time as an adult, probably with a little too much hype behind it. So, Harold, we'll count them all as one. Although I would be curious, Lord of the Rings first, what did you think of those versus the Hobbit movies?
Okay, so Lord of the Rings, I love the story. I don't know why I've never watched them. It was funny because, like, you know, I play D&D, and it's like that's peak D&D energy. But yeah, man, I love the story. I love the characters. I really enjoyed the Two Towers. I think that was my favorite one of the three of the Lord of the Rings movies. But yeah, there was things that like stuck out to me in the movies, like there was like I think it was I keep getting them mixed up a little bit because I've just watched them all in a row. But I think it was in Lord of the Rings where they had the guy that was like the shapeshifter that could turn into a bear, or was that the Hobbit?
I think that's the Hobbit.
Okay, well, when we get to that guy should have had his own movie. I was like, that is awesome. But I just remember seeing things, and I don't know that it was necessarily overhyped, but I definitely had heard about it like all the time. Like, oh my God, you haven't seen it, you've got to watch it. But I knew enough about, you know, when something is as big as this franchise, it proliferates media, like it goes through everything. Like it gets no matter if you're a fan of that property or know about it, like you know about it because it's in memes. Like, so that was like the funny thing for me. I'd be like, oh, that's that scene from that meme. There's Sean Bean, and that's Winter is Coming, or not Winter is Coming, but the
one does not simply walk into Mordor.
I was like, oh man, there's that part in the movie like I always see that meme of. I was like, that's funny. And then just hearing things, like I always hear my friends say, like, potatoes or what's taters, eh? And I'm like, oh, that's what that's from. Like, there's that part. Like, it was just like, it's funny to see that thing come to fruition of like, okay, like I get it now. But yeah, out of the Lord of the Rings, like the proper trilogy, I probably liked The Two Towers the best.
That's a good choice. Two Towers is having not rewatched them since college, so nearly 10 years ago. This is why it's very top of mind to me to rewatch in 2021. But as I recall, I think Two Towers is my favorite as well. The Battle of Helm's Deep is, I mean, I know Return of the King, obviously you get the massive, the biggest battles imaginable, but I kind of like how tight the Battle of Helm's Deep is. I like all the Rohan subplots. And then, of course, the scene, especially in 2020, right? The scene where Gandalf shows up on the hill, the dawn of the third day. I mean, come on. It's great stuff.
Yeah, it was cool. And I love the way they did the characters. You know, it's like the like Gimli not getting along with the guys, and then, you know, really like coming together with him at the end. What's Orlando Bloom's character's name again?
Legolas.
Legolas, like when they're like doing the count, like the kill count, like that was cracking me up. So I love things like that, man. Like I love the way that they were, you know, fleshing out those characters, and there were so many like different personalities. Like I couldn't really nail down a favorite character because like I was like, man, this guy's awesome, and so is this guy. Like, so I just, you know, I'm glad that I finally took the time to just sit down and like watch all of them. So
yeah,
we watched the Lord of the Rings first, and then we watched the Hobbit movies after.
That's the correct order. It's almost kind of like the Star Wars question now. Which ones do I start with? Because technically the Hobbit films chronologically take place first. What did you think about the Hobbit trilogy?
I actually like that. I liked it quite a bit. I really wrestle if I like them better than Lord of the Rings or not. But I found that I really liked Martin Freeman, the young Bilbo. Like I thought that character was awesome. And then Benedict Cumberbatch. What was funny about that was Madison had never seen The Hobbit either. My wife, so we watched those movies. We watched all three of them together, and I told her that Benedict Cumberbatch was in the series. So she's looking for him the whole time. And she's like, I never saw that guy. I was like, oh, he's the dragon. But I didn't even it didn't even register. I just like offhand was like, oh yeah, Hobbit, like Benedict Cumberbatch is in these. So she's like, oh, cool. And then unbeknownst to me, she's like looking for this guy the whole time. She's like, where is this guy?
That's gonna be amazing by the time you get to the third one, the Battle of the Five Armies or whatever, and you're halfway through, and she's like, I don't see Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, God, it killed me. But yeah, man, I had a lot of fun watching them. Like I didn't want to like go to sleep because like we couldn't finish them in the night. Like we'd be going to bed because she still had to go to work. You know, she works at a hospital, so it's like they didn't close. And then obviously I still had to work, but I didn't have to drive to work. But it was just funny to be like, oh, like I don't want to stop for them. Like let's just stay up late and watch them. Like
it's like you're binging a TV show. You're binging a TV show where the episodes are 3.5 hours long each.
Right. You're like, okay, just one more.
Oh man, those are good. That's a really good pick, and you are of a rare breed who hasn't seen Lord of the Rings at this point in the game. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's great. I at this point, I'm always really interested in getting the take from people who haven't like grown up with something, you know, that's like so fundamental to the movie watching history of a lot of folks. I guess my last question with both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is, is this something that you think you're going to rewatch and it'll stick with you down the road, or do you think it's more like a comfort watch? You watched it and you're going to move on?
No, I definitely think that I could rewatch these. Like they're a lot of fun, and like there's little things that I'm not remembering that I'm like, I need to rewatch that and see like what that was or whatever, or just putting it on, maybe a little bit of both. Like I could just watch it and just be into it, or I could just like be doing something and like have it on and be like, oh, there's that part where this happens. I'll tune into this and then go back to playing on my Switch or whatever. Like, like one of those background things. So I could really see it being both. And I really is like one of those things that it was like, I almost was glad that I watched it as an adult so that I could really, really understand what's going on and really grasp some of the concepts and follow the storylines and stuff. I feel like I watched it as a kid. I'd be like, I don't know what's going on, but the fights are awesome. So
I think that's
I think because the first one came out in 01, right?
01, yeah, it turns 20 this next year.
Yeah. So I would have been 10 years old when that first one came out.
10 years? Yeah. Yeah, no, same. Yeah, you and I are the same age. That's right. Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah, you're born 91, too.
91, yeah.
A little bit of a spoiler for like an honorable mention. I'll just do one, but that's how it felt last year was, or in 2019, actually, it was, I went and watched The Matrix when it came back to theaters.
Yes.
In the Dolby. And I was like, dang. Like, I went with a friend of mine from work. We got out and I was like, still holds up. Still holds up.
Yes, 100%. The Matrix is, that's another one. Laura and I also, my girlfriend, we also went and saw that at the Dolby Theater. And man, that movie could have come out like, the original could have come out like today and played in the Dolby, and I would have believed it was a new movie. That's how good it looks.
Still would have slapped. Yep.
Yeah.
That freaking bullet time is insane, man. Like, so sick.
It's nuts. Well, Harold, we do have honorable mentions. We'll get to those in a minute, but I do want to hit on the third film. You have 3 films to get through the pandemic. The first one's Tenet. You've got, yes, sort of a cheat, but you do get The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, all the Middle-earth things, by the way, right in time for the Amazon Prime show that's coming out theoretically next year.
I know, boy.
Right. But third film, what is the last movie that comes to mind when you think about getting through, this year of unprecedented times or the 2020 pandemic?
Yeah, okay, so this one's probably kind of a dark horse. It's a movie called Paddleton.
All right, listen, how about this? How about I'm going to make a statement, and if it's a true statement, then you don't have to correct me. Is what Michael has incurable?
Yeah, that's a question. It has to be
All right, it has to be a statement.
And then it
All right, so my statement is what Michael has is incurable.
That's it.
So I'm thinking, before it gets bad, I want to end it. I don't want to change things, I want to make some pizzas. I want to play some Paddleton. They got a whole process that they give you these pills you can take, but I don't want to do it alone, and I was hoping you would help me out.
It has Mark Duplass and Ray Romano. The big thing that, I don't know what made me watch this movie, but I've always loved like character-driven movies. And I watched this entire movie and got to the end and was just like, this was like just 2 guys talking. Like, and I loved this movie. It was like, I don't want to give too much of it away, but we find out that Mark Duplass's character has a terminal illness, and his best friend is like his neighbor. Ray Romano is like, just kind of there for him. Like, they're doing the thing. They've invented a game. It's called Paddleton, and they play this game. It's just like they hit a tennis ball and try to make it land in a trash can. It's so random, and they just hang out and like make pizzas and watch kung fu movies. Like, it's just their thing. But they had such chemistry in this movie that by the end, like, I was just like, man, this is like a really compelling story, and like I'm really invested in these characters. And I don't know, it just stuck out to me. It just randomly, it popped up, and I saw that it had great reviews. I was just like, I'll give this a shot. Like, it may have been because my buddy had told me about a Ray Romano like stand-up special, and I was like, I've never heard of his stand-up, but I watched it, and he's like hilarious. Like, I've never really checked out his stand-up. And so it might have been like just fresh on the brain. I was like, oh, he did this movie. Let's check this movie out too. And I was just like blown away by how much, how well done this movie was with the writing, the character development, the story arcs. It was very good. And I think it was, I can't remember if it was a Netflix original or not, but I watched it on Netflix.
Yeah, I'm glad you give a shout out to Ray Romano. He's been on the upswing lately. He did The Irishman last year. He was also in an HBO original film, Bad Education, this year that I thought he was quite good in. Real charming fellow. I kind of like him stepping back into this acting career. Is this something you watched during the pandemic, or had you already seen it?
I think it was. I'd watched it just randomly. I can't remember if we were in quarantine proper or what, but I do remember I watched it at home. Like, it was randomly on Netflix, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of this, but it looks cool, so I just like checked it out. I like Mark Duplass in Office Space. So I was just like, oh, like that guy's funny, and Ray Romano's funny. I just watched that stand-up, so let me check this out.
Very cool. And I mean, have you already seen it more than one time then, or did you watch?
No, Yeah, just the once. I would definitely watch it again though. Like it's one of those movies. Like you probably have these movies where you're like, I like this movie and I want to be with someone when they see this for the first time. Like I would love to show this movie to someone. So it was one of those for me for sure. And I've just like, I'm just such an emotional guy as it is. Like I tell my friends that I love them. One of the big things we can't do now, I love giving people hugs and just to be like, getting in there, and we can't do that anymore, and then just like killing me, So I've always been an emotional guy and like not scared to like share my feelings. And that was such a character-driven, people-centric movie that it was just like the story of these two guys, and by the end it's like you're just like gut-wrenching. And I was blown away that how funny it was, and then by the end that how emotional it was. I was like, wow, this is like a huge spectrum of emotions they've gone through in this movie.
Yeah. So I looked it up, and it looks like Paddleton is a Netflix original, and so it is original to Netflix. Came out in February of 2019. Very cool. I actually, Harold, this was nowhere on my radar, so I appreciate the shout out, and it look like the reviews are pretty positive too. I'm with you. Pretty much anything Mark Duplass works on, I'm at least curious about. If things he's actually starring in, he usually is pretty good. That guy's very selective about his scripts. So no, that's a great pick.
Thanks, man. Yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think.
All right, Harold, so you picked 3 different films, but before we close out, there are probably a lot of things you watched, so we got to close out with an honorable mentions lightning round. And I'll even let us bend the rules a little bit more here. So you could say films, you could even say television shows, video games, maybe if you read books, whatever the case may be. If you want to give a shout out to any sorts of pop culture that got you through the pandemic. Now the trick is we're going to do this in 90 seconds. So I'm gonna tell you when. We'll start. No pressure.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready, I'm gonna hit start, and then you're gonna have 90 seconds to get through your list of honorable mentions.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, we are starting rapid fire final round now.
Okay, a video game. I got it right before the the quarantine hit. Animal Crossing. I played the crap out of it. It like got me through the whole freaking quarantine. It was amazing. A Netflix original, Mank. That was really good. Gary Oldman. I think you guys did an episode on it. It was awesome. There was a movie came out with Chris Hemsworth. It was called Extraction. That was a Netflix original too.
It was Biceps.
Got to give it a shout out. Chris J. Alex was in it. We interviewed him. Remember?
Yeah.
He was in it briefly. Yeah. I watched Underwater with Kristen Stewart. I can't remember if that was at the beginning of 2020 or what.
That was a 2020 film. I also watched it during the pandemic.
It was interesting.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
Something.
I got anime, Great Pretender. It was a Netflix original. I'm just like on Netflix horror, I guess. But it was a Netflix original anime, and I thought it was amazing. Like it has 2 seasons now. I watched the first season in the pandemic proper. Haikyuu is another anime all about volleyball. I randomly just wanted to watch that. One of the trippy ones I watched was I don't know who produced this, but it was I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Oh yeah. That's the film Netflix. Yeah, I know that's Charlie Kaufman. Great film.
I could not stop watching it. It was just like it was a point where I didn't know what was going on, but I couldn't stop watching it. Anyway, those are my honorable mentions.
My man coming in 2 seconds early. What's up? That is how we keep a time limit around here. Great job. Man, those are some great picks. You mentioned several in there. Great Pretender, one I didn't get to, but I heard a lot of positive things about. And yeah, Thinking of Ending Things. Great pick. Charlie Kaufman. Highly recommend Netflix film. It is weird and not for everybody, but man, I love that movie.
Dude, shout out to Toni Collette too.
Give her an Oscar already. Good grief, folks.
I know. She should have won one for freaking Hereditary.
All right. Well, Harold, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day just to talk us through like, hey, how did 2020 impact Tunes? How did it impact you? The cool things you're doing. Now, if people want to keep up with you and your work on the internet, whether it's your podcast, personal channels, where can they find you at?
Yeah, man, for the podcast, you'd mentioned earlier, yeah, we're just anywhere that you could find your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's just Tunes Podcast, TUNES/TOONS. And then you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I just like to do funny, cool stuff. We'll do head-to-head stuff. I got some cool things in the works with like some ideas of like recurring guests that I want to have back on for some head-to-head battle type things. That'll be really cool. And then you can follow me personally on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It's just Harold Storey, Storey. Don't forget the E. Don't forget it.
Don't forget the E. And you got to, if you only pick one of those channels, people pick Harold's Instagram. He's extremely impressive at the Instagram. He'll keep you engaged for sure. Harold, any closing thoughts either about the 3 films that you picked or any of the content you're creating?
No, man, I just, have to thank you for having me on. I've loved watching or listening to your show. You're a prolific bastard, like putting out if there's a movie coming out, you're basically doing an episode about it every time. Like what you're doing over there. I like your takes. I like the analysis. It's more, that's what I've always liked about you guys, is that it's more than just like, do we like it? Do we not like it? It's like getting into the meat of like, why do we like this thing? Why do we not like this thing? So yeah, big shout out to Cinematic Schematic and the Cinematropolis proper.
Hey man, appreciate it. We're trying to get in, trying to get back, trying to get back up to pace here in 2021 ourselves. So thanks for the kind words, and thank you for joining us. All right, well, Harold Storey, the host and producer of the Tunes podcast, and one of, in my opinion, Oklahoma's great pop culture content creators, or at least a staple of our podcast community here. If you're into the pop culture, particularly with music and animation, Harold, thanks so much for joining the Cinematic Schematic today.
Of course, thank you, sir.
Thank you for tuning in to part 7 of our ongoing series on 3 films that got you through the 2020 pandemic with special guest Harold Storey. Stay tuned to hear who we'll be talking with next week. If you enjoyed today's show and you would like to participate in this particular series, the 3 films that got you through the 2020 pandemic, please consider sending in your 3 films to our email address, thecinematropolis@gmail.com, or you can also send us your picks on our social media channels on Facebook and Twitter. By sending in these picks, you actually are entering yourself for a chance to have those picks read on the show. I also want to encourage you to please rate our podcast and subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And again, you can follow all of our work on the Cinematropolis by heading on over to thecinematropolis.com or following us on Twitter at The Cinematrop or on Facebook at facebook.com/The Cinematropolis. And you can always keep up with more of my personal takes on my Twitter at CMastersTalk. That is letter C, Masters Talk, where I'm tweeting about all things film, television, video games, and pop culture. Join me next week when I talk to a man who has done it all. I speak with the managing partner of Tower Theater. He's also the director of technology at the Dead Center Film Festival and the founder of Mostly Harmless Media, Steven Tyler. I'll talk with Steven about his 3 film selections, as well as how the pandemic impacted his work running a locally owned theater at the Tower Theater here in OKC. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you again next time.